So, I want you to try a little thought experiment with me for a second. Imagine you are trying to bake this, like, massive, incredibly complex wedding cake.
Right. Okay. I'm picturing it.
But the catch is, your kitchen is basically the size of a shoebox.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that sounds like a nightmare.
Right. And to make it even worse, you have to walk all the way across town just to get a single cup of flour every time you need it.
I mean, you'd never finish the cake.
Right.
Or, it could take you months.
Exactly. And welcome to today's deep dive, by the way, because that ridiculous baking scenario, that is essentially what the entire tech industry has been doing with artificial intelligence training for the last few years.
Yeah, it really is. It's a perfect analogy for the massive bottleneck we're seeing right now.
Right. And today, our mission is to unpack this comprehensive dossier we have on a company called Cerebras Systems. They're this Silicon Valley hardware company that is basically trying to completely upend the AI industry by building a bigger kitchen.
A much, much bigger kitchen.
Yeah. We are going to analyze the financial risks, the massive potential rewards of their anticipated initial public offering, and really just dig into how they are trying to solve this fundamental wall that AI hardware crashed into.
And it's a huge deal. I mean, we're looking at historical context from their founding back in 2016, plus all these crazy technical specs on their what they call their Wafer-Scale Engine, and of course the financial projections around their public debut.
Yeah, to really understand why this IPO is generating such intense buzz on Wall Street, we first have to understand that hardware wall and how this team, led by this serial entrepreneur Andrew Feldman, decided to just, smash right through it.
Well, the core problem, as our source material lays out, really revolves around traditional GPUs, or graphics processing units.
Right, which everyone associates with AI right now.
Exactly. But you have to remember, GPUs were originally designed for rendering video games. They were not built from the ground up for the complex, matrix calculations that massive modern AI models need, like ChatGPT or Google's BERT.
Wait, so break that down a bit. Why is using gaming tech for AI such a bottleneck? I mean, they're both just computer processing, right?
Well, sort of. But the workloads are totally different. As AI workloads exploded, training times just ballooned. What used to take days was suddenly taking weeks or even months.
Wow.
Yeah. And the fundamental limitation there isn't actually just the processing power itself. It's the data movement between multiple small chips.
Okay, so going back to my cake analogy, it's like having a massive team of workers trying to build a skyscraper.
Yeah.
But they all speak different languages, and they have to use this single tiny elevator just to share their blueprints.
Yes, that's exactly it. The elevator is the data connection between the chips. In a traditional GPU cluster, you have thousands of small chips. When they work on a massive AI model, they have to constantly share data. So they calculate a piece of the puzzle, and then they have to send that data off their chip, across a circuit board, through a network cable, and into another chip.
Which takes time.
A huge amount of time, relatively speaking, and energy. It's wildly inefficient.
But let me push back on that for a second, because if you read the financial news, I mean, if GPUs are so ill-equipped for this, why are companies like NVIDIA currently worth trillions of dollars?
Yeah.
They're completely dominating the space right now.
It's a fair question, and the answer is that GPUs were the best available tool. They were the only game in town, really.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, the industry basically adapted general-purpose technology to solve a very specific, very new problem. It was a brute force approach, just string more and more GPUs together. But Cerebras, they asked a completely different question back in 2016.
Which was what?
What if we built hardware exclusively optimized for AI, literally from the ground up? No legacy gaming architecture, just pure AI performance.
And that realization that we needed a totally new architecture leads directly to Cerebras' radical, completely rule-breaking solution, which quite literally changes the shape of the whole industry.
It physically changes it, yeah.
Right. So let's talk about that shape. Let's talk about the Wafer-Scale Engine, or the WSE, because the specs on this thing are just mind-boggling.
They really sound like science fiction.
They do. So our source notes that their latest iteration, the WSE2, boasts over 2.6 trillion transistors, trillion with a T, and 850,000 AI-optimized cores.
It's just hard to even conceptualize that scale.
It is, but the text gives this great physical comparison to help visualize it. So a traditional high-end GPU from NVIDIA or AMD is roughly the size of a postage stamp.
Right.
The Cerebras Wafer-Scale Engine is the size of a dinner plate.
A full dinner plate. It's completely wild because traditionally you take a silicon wafer, which is exactly what it sounds like, a big round disk of silicon, and you print the chips on it.
Uh-huh.
But then you cut that wafer into dozens of smaller chips. That's the standard industry practice.
Why do they cut it up?
Two main reasons. First, manufacturing defects. If there's a microscopic flaw in one part of the wafer, you just throw away that one little chip and keep the rest. And second, heat. Small chips are much easier to cool.
Oh, sure. That makes sense.
But Cerebras use these proprietary techniques to just keep the entire wafer intact as one massive, continuous chip.
Okay, so what is the actual technological advantage of keeping it all on one plate? Like, how does that solve the elevator problem we talked about earlier?
It entirely eliminates the elevator. Keeping everything on a single chip drastically minimizes those data movement bottlenecks. The cores aren't sending data across a network cable. They're communicating directly over the silicon right next to each other.
Wow.
Yeah, so this allows Cerebras to train AI models up to 100 times faster than a traditional GPU cluster.
100 times.
100 times. So a training cycle that used to take a whole month theoretically drops down to just a few hours.
That's game-changing for data scientists. And we actually have real-world proof of this in the dossier. It's not just lab theory. They partnered with the National Energy Technology Laboratory for fluid dynamics modeling.
Right, simulating how liquids and gases move, which is notoriously difficult math.
Yeah, right. Extremely complex. And they broke records doing it. And then there's GlaxoSmithKline. They're using the WSE to simulate massive molecular interactions for rapid drug discovery.
Because when you're simulating millions of molecules, you need all those 850,000 cores talking to each other instantly.
But wait, I have to ask. If traditional chip makers cut wafers up specifically to avoid manufacturing defects ruining the whole batch, how does Cerebras avoid throwing away entire, expensive dinner plates of silicon if there's just one tiny microscopic flaw?
That is the genius of their engineering, and it's highly proprietary. Basically, they engineered redundancy into the chip.
Oh, like backup systems.
Exactly. They map out the microscopic flaws during manufacturing, and their software physically routes the data around the broken parts. It's like a detour on a highway, so the chip is self-healing in a way.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
So they solved the defect problem.
They did. Which brings us to the whole reason we're doing this deep dive. Having established that the tech actually works and is genuinely revolutionary, how does this translate into a business capable of pulling off a multi-billion-dollar IPO?
Right. Because having cool tech is one thing, but Wall Street is a whole different ballgame. Let's look at the financial core of this. The AI hardware and software market is projected by IDC to hit $500 billion by 2027.
$500 billion.
Yeah, the pie is huge. And Cerebras has raised over $720 million privately across multiple rounds so far. They boasted a valuation of over $4 billion back in 2021. And they are backed by some serious heavyweights. Benchmark Capital, Altimeter Capital, the Abu Dhabi Growth Fund.
Those are not small players. When investors like that get involved, they are looking for a massive exit.
So what are the potential rewards here? What does an IPO look like for them?
Well, a conservative estimate places a public valuation at somewhere between $5 to $7 billion. But the real question is, what do they do with that influx of cash?
Right, because going public isn't just about cashing out. It's about raising capital to grow.
Exactly. And the source points to three main growth phases post-IPO. First, scaling up the physical production of these massive WSE chips. Manufacturing at the dinner plate scale requires securing totally unprecedented supply chains.
Yeah.
Second, funding R&D for next-generation hardware. You can't stand still in tech. And third, and this is crucially important, building out their software ecosystem.
To actually make the hardware usable for everyday developers.
Right. If the software is too hard to use, no one buys the hardware.
It's like, I think of it like adding rocket fuel to a prototype engine.
Yeah.
You've proven the engine works perfectly in the lab, but now you need billions of dollars to build the factory that actually puts that engine into every car on the road.
That's a great way to put it. And there's a specific reason institutional investors might really salivate over this IPO. Cerebras is what analysts call a pure-play AI hardware company.
Pure play meaning they only do one thing.
Exactly. Unlike NVIDIA, which still relies really heavily on consumer gaming graphics cards and, general data center processing, an investment in Cerebras is a 100% concentrated bet on the future of AI training.
Got it. So if you believe AI training is the future, you buy the stock that does nothing else.
Precisely. It's a highly leveraged bet.
Okay. But a massive valuation and a huge influx of cash doesn't just, erase the immense risks of going head-to-head with the biggest players in the tech world. Which brings us to the elephant in the room.
A $2 trillion elephant, yeah.
NVIDIA dominates over 80% of the AI chip market right now. And our text lists a whole bunch of other competitors, too. You got AMD, startups like GraphCore and SambaNova, and even Google's in-house TPUs, their tensor processing units.
It is an incredibly crowded and brutal landscape.
So what are the actual financial risks of this IPO? Because it sounds terrifying to go up against that.
It is. The primary risk is that Cerebras operates in a highly capital-intensive industry with notoriously long sales cycles. Selling a multi-million-dollar dinner plate server to a massive corporation takes months, sometimes years, of negotiations and pilot programs.
Right. They aren't selling consumer laptops here.
No, and proving a reliable, fast path to profitability under the intense quarter-by-quarter scrutiny of public market analysts, that's going to be a massive hurdle. Public markets are impatient.
And there's another massive hurdle mentioned in the source, right? NVIDIA's secret weapon.
Yes, the CUDA software platform.
The CUDA moat.
Exactly. CUDA is the deeply entrenched, de facto standard software for AI developers. NVIDIA spent over a decade making sure every university taught it and every researcher used it.
So basically, Cerebras doesn't just have to build a faster chip. They have to convince an entire generation of developers to learn a whole new way of working.
That's the challenge.
Yeah.
And developers hate rewriting their code. It's expensive and it's risky.
Okay, so let me challenge their whole business model then. Is it really smart to go to war with NVIDIA? I mean, isn't that like a boutique soda company trying to put Coca-Cola out of business?
Well, if they were trying to replace NVIDIA everywhere, yes, it would be suicidal. But the dossier outlines their actual strategy, and it's much smarter than that. They aren't trying to be Coca-Cola.
Okay, so what are they doing?
They are targeting a highly specific niche. They are going after trillion parameter model.
Trillion parameter. That's the absolute biggest of the big.
Exactly. The absolute bleeding edge where speed and scale are paramount. And crucially, where the GPU data transfer latency, that elevator problem we talked about, is absolutely crippling.
So they're saying, hey, keep your NVIDIA chips for the small stuff, but when you need to build the biggest AI in the world, you have to use our dinner plate.
Precisely. It's a wedge strategy. And there's another fascinating detail from the text that ties into this strategy: sustainability.
Right, the energy aspect. Because training these large models requires vast amounts of energy, like whole power plants worth of energy.
It's becoming a major crisis for the grid. But Cerebras claims its systems are vastly more energy efficient for these specific, massive workloads.
Because they don't have to push data across miles of network cables.
Exactly. The data stays on the plate. And from a financial perspective, ESG, environmental, social, and governance concerns are a huge deal right now.
Right. Companies have carbon quotas they have to hit.
Yeah. So this energy efficiency could become a massive financial catalyst for enterprise and government adoption. If you're a government agency and you need to train an AI and Cerebras can do it using half the electricity of an NVIDIA cluster, that's a massive selling point.
That makes total sense. But, ultimately, navigating all these massive risks and capitalizing on these distinct advantages, it all comes down to the human element steering the ship.
It always does. Execution is everything.
Yeah. So let's shine a spotlight on the team behind the tech. We mentioned CEO Andrew Feldman earlier. He has gathered some serious top-tier talent from competitors. We're talking engineers from Intel, AMD, Apple.
Feldman is not a rookie. He's a serial entrepreneur who knows how to scale hardware companies.
And his vision is ambitious. He's talking about slashing the time and cost of training models to democratize AI, to tackle monumental human challenges like disease and climate change.
Which is a great story for an IPO roadshow. But the public markets demand more than a great story. Addressing the focus of our deep dive, there are critical milestones Cerebras absolutely must hit to scale operations globally after they go public.
What are the big ones?
First, transitioning from being a cool prototype used by a few government labs to a reliable enterprise staple. They need banks, healthcare giants, and logistics companies buying these systems routinely.
Right. They need to prove they can scale their customer base way beyond early adopters like the Department of Energy.
Exactly. And the most difficult milestone: balancing rapid, cash-burning innovation with the strict execution and quarterly earnings expectations of Wall Street.
Because Wall Street hates it when you burn too much cash, but in hardware, if you don't burn cash on R&D, you die.
It's an incredibly tightrope to walk.
It strikes me that a poorly received IPO wouldn't just hurt Cerebras. It could chill the entire market for niche, purpose-built AI hardware.
Oh, absolutely.
It would essentially signal to the whole industry and to venture capitalists that NVIDIA's general-purpose dominance is just unbreakable. Why even try to compete?
Exactly. The stakes are much higher than just one company's valuation. It's about validating an entirely new approach to computing infrastructure.
Wow. Okay, let's synthesize this whole journey.
Yeah.
We've looked at how traditional GPUs bottlenecked AI by forcing data through tiny elevators. We saw how Cerebras solved this by basically turning the whole silicon wafer into a single 2.6 trillion transistor dinner plate.
And we covered how an IPO could give them the multi-billion-dollar war chest they need to scale their software and production against Goliath competitors like NVIDIA.
Right. And how they're specifically targeting those massive trillion parameter models where energy efficiency and speed are existential.
It's an incredible narrative.
It really is. And before we go, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final sort of unscripted question to ponder based on all this.
Ooh, all right, let's hear it.
If Cerebras actually proves that massive specialized chips are the absolute best way to train AI, could we see a future where general-purpose hardware becomes entirely obsolete in the data center?
Wow. That would change everything.
Right. Like, will the tech world of the 2030s look back at NVIDIA's current GPUs the way we look back at dial-up internet, just as this necessary but ultimately, like, clunky stepping stone to the real thing?
That is a fascinating thought, a total paradigm shift.
I think it's definitely something to watch.
Okay.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring the future of tech, keep asking the hard questions, and we will see you next time.